GTR24H Sprint Series Season 2, Monza, is presented in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, A-Stick Sim Sport, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
Hello everyone and welcome to GTR24H. It's been a long wait since season 1 of the Sprint Series. It feels like a relatively long wait since the end of the Endurance E-Racing World Championship from Le Mans in October. But we're finally here. Season 2 of the Sprint Series back on Assetto Corsa Competizione and heading onto the circuit where everything left off back feels like half a year ago, maybe a bit more than that, in Italy. Joining me, Kieran McGinley, and Kieran, I'm delighted to have you alongside me, and qualifying about to get underway as well.
Absolutely. Welcome along everyone to the start of the second season of the Sprint Series, and we start here the wonderful Monza circuit here in Italy, the Temple of Speed. And my goodness, 11 corners takes you very quickly through the rest of this lap. Should be absolutely critical, you should say, of qualifying coming up, because you really do want to be first in towards the Rettifilo chicane by all the chaos that could ensue.
And we've been taking a look at some of the times that we've been seeing in practice, and the top 3 or 4 drivers looking very even in terms of pace. So I'm super excited to see how close they will be over the course of qualifying. But you started talking about the circuit. I want to delve into this circuit a little bit more, because on the surface, Monza is a relatively simple track. There's nothing too difficult about it, but one corner, or one sequence of corners for me really stands out, and that's the Ascari, because the brave drivers can carry speed through Ascari, and some of those who are less brave, like myself, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not driving, just struggle to carry the speed because that rear end gets super twitchy.
Yeah, it really, really does. And if you've not got this car set up for the likes of Ascari there, you will start to struggle. In any case, though, you've got to have a car that has just enough downforce to get you through those corners without compromising your top speeds down these long, long straights. It really is trying to find the right compromise between just having just enough grip and not actually harming your top speed too much, because you'll leave yourself vulnerable down towards the heavy braking zones.
And one of the things that I really remember from season 1 of the Sprint Series, when we were here at Monza for, I think it was a penultimate round of the season, was we had a thrilling chase to the wire, and I believe it was Ross McGregor hunting down Pierluca Amato for the lead. At the time, it was Pierluca Amato for Master and Ross McGregor for Simply Race and Show. And Ross was closing in by about a second a lap, but you could always see just a little bit of understeer actually into Lesmo 1 and Lesmo 2. Lesmo 1 particularly, and it was something that I spoke to him after the race. He was racing in a BMW, and we've got a fair few BMWs today, so I wonder whether we're going to be seeing some of those understeer issues affecting some of our drivers tonight.
Could do. It's going to be something the drivers are going to have to prepare themselves for. It's no doubt something that they've reviewed that. They've put in countless laps to make sure that that's not really too much in the session there. So yeah, it's all right. I just got slightly interrupted there. It's all right. Well, the point I was saying, it was trying to move me on, you see. The point I'm trying to say is the drivers will have done this countless times. They'll put countless laps in, so they will have made the setup tweaks necessary to try and make that less of a problem.
Absolutely. One thing I want to touch on is I talked about the battle between Pierluca Amato and Ross McGregor from last year. You'll notice that Pierluca Amato is racing this year. We have our essentially one of the two drivers that took the season 1 title, the inaugural Sprint Series title. Sadly, Tiziano Brioni cannot race as well. It was possible that he could, but sadly he was unable to join us for the season. Either way, Pierluca Amato is here, reigning champion, sitting at the top as well, as one might expect, and switching over to this BMW, which we've seen a couple of people looking towards.
Yeah, you're not going to miss this BMW in a hurry, are you? You can quickly spot Pierluca Amato in the field this year as he makes his way down towards the Rettifilo chicane. And yeah, the added pressure that you are the champion, all the crosshairs are going to be fixated on you and your car and how you get on during the season. And he'll want to get right off onto the right foot. It's a long, long season, Yusuf, and we're really touring around some of the best tracks we can come across here in ACC.
Yeah, some fantastic circuits. I know one that a lot of drivers will be looking towards is probably Kyle. I mean, we had a great race in South Africa for season 1, and then there's a whole host of other circuits. We've got our season finale all the way in Spa-Francorchamps, and that's actually on June the 30th, more than half a year away. However, free practice will be drawing to a close momentarily, and then we will be jumping on in for qualifying. One other thing I do want to touch on is that opening lap we might be seeing in, about 40 minutes from now. We could be having absolute carnage because turn 1 is such a big braking force down into the corner. And when you've got cars going in 2 by 2, one driver outbraking themselves is all you need for absolute carnage to ensue.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very critical that you keep your wits about you, especially those opening stages. We do say sprint series. It is a 2-hour race, so yes, it is a sprint compared to what we were running in the EWC. It's going to still be keeping your wits about you going in towards turn 1. The race can't be won on the first minute of the sprint series, but it can certainly be lost if you're really, really not careful.
One other thing I do want to touch on is maybe some of the other drivers that we might be able to see really contending for some of these wins. We've got Team Ballas and Renegade Sim Racing Work Group, and Team Ballas entering in essentially 2 cars, Renegade Sim Racing Work Group entering 3. So maybe we'll see a bit of teamwork between the drivers being able to challenge the likes of Pierluca Amato towards the front end of the field.
Yeah, we might see the teamwork this early on, but it's going to be tricky to say, in all honesty, because every driver is really going to try and get a Drivers' Championship for themselves, so they're not going to really want to be yielding at this point in the season. You don't want to go belly up at this point. You want to try and make your mark and say, yeah, I'm the driver that's going to be ready, and I should have the backing to take on Pierluca Amato. I mean, Amato doesn't have that issue. He's just got to drive fast, and he should be at the pointy end of the field. But yeah, as you say, with teams coming into this as well, not necessarily working with each other at all times, they will try and put all their collective heads together to try and get at least one of their drivers up towards the pointy end of the field.
Another driver I want to bring up is Christian Sendle, partnered by Sandro Van Sand for this race. We can see that it's relatively close between Amato and Sendle at the moment, and Sendle with a fair amount of sim racing experience, but a lot of that from the F1 at Codemaster Games, and now making the switch over to Assetto Corsa Competizione, but at the moment seeming to show that it's a rather seamless transition.
Yeah, it makes it look easy, doesn't it? I can guarantee you it is not that easy. I mean, I've been in a sim where we're all in Denmark, and it is absolutely not easy to transition whatsoever. The cars are, you know, they are very different in terms of setup. There's so many things you can change on it, but also one of the most prominent things is how little aero these cars have compared to their F1 counterparts. You really cannot take the Lesmos at that high speed anymore. You've got to really think about, because these corners become corners in these cars. You've actually got to think about them. You've got to pick out your braking spots, and as long as he doesn't get mixed up with his F1 braking points, I think he'll be just fine. He's currently second fastest in practice right now, just over a tenth over our reigning champion Pierluca Amato. That's in the practice session though, all to play for in qualifying, as that's Wojciech Dvorak getting a little bit twitchy going through a Ascari. You were touching on that earlier, Yusuf, there. Yeah, very, very the limit there, I would say.
And we have seen cars having moments through Ascari, and I'm sure that will not be the last time we see someone a little bit sideways. Just keeping an eye out on some of the different manufacturers that are on circuit. It was one of Ewan's and my own favourite pastimes over the course of last year. We've got one Mercedes eking its way, and that is for Barzaghi, who is in the number 8, which is the Team Ballas eSports car.
Absolutely, and we shall see how they all get on at the moment in this practice session. It's Pierluca Amato at the top of the table. There he is, just coming out of the pit lane and out of the Rettifilo chicane to go for another lap there. Wojciech Dvorak, you can see there in the Ledge Racing car, in third place at the moment, and pretty close. The top 4 cars at the moment in terms of time, they're all within 0.4 of a second of each other, so should be interesting going in towards qualifying. Should be a great battle for pole position later on this evening.
And we should be jumping into qualifying shortly. A couple of issues, as we should have jumped on into qualifying not too long ago, but sadly there are a few delays. We shall be underway as soon as they are dealt with. We are seeing time so far mid-49s from most of the drivers. We don't really know though if they are running with essentially a qualifying sim or running with a full fuel load and running with those race trims, because once we do get into qualifying, we would be expecting the drivers probably to be getting into the 48s, maybe even the 47s.
With race fuel there, when you've got the setup to make sure that everything works perfectly, yes, you should be expecting in towards maybe even touching into the 47s, but you're right there, it's a sense of practice. You don't really want to be putting all of your cards out there. You want to at least keep some of them close to your chest. Don't give away how much pace you truly have until the last real moment in qualifying. That seems to be a good strategy moving forward for some of these drivers.
So we're having a couple more drivers joining into the server. We'll get a bit closer towards the race. One other thing I do just want to touch on, just a reminder, a 15-round championship we have ahead, and the format for qualifying and races is essentially qualifying a 30-minute shootout, and then the race will be 2 hours. One mandatory pit stop but a driver change is not compulsory, so we do have a few one-man teams out on circuit. And I actually wonder, Kieran, whether that's going to be affecting any of them, whether we'll see any tiredness really kicking in, because sometimes 2 hours is a long time to be in a car non-stop, and maybe we'll just start to see a bit of lapse of focus towards the end of the race.
Perhaps, yes, but I think realistically 2 hours in one of these cars is quite a relatively shortish stint. You can go for longer. We've seen drivers take them for longer, but you're right, in the sense of a sprint series where the name implies it's going to be hard and fast, you are going to be trying to push these cars to their limit and try and get all of the performance you can out of these cars. So, you know, what can you do in 2 hours? On the other side of it, though, is 1 hour really enough to really get yourself into that momentum and get yourself ready and into the groove before you're then taken out of the car and the new driver comes in, and then is an hour enough to get in fully into the groove there? It's a bit of a balance here, which should provide an interesting tale of what's to come for the rest of the season. Which will work, the one driver for 2 hours or the two drivers with 1 hour stints? We'll wait and see.
Yeah. So with regards to that as well, and maybe we'll just see as we get towards essentially that second session. Sometimes you do see the new driver who essentially joins into the car being a little bit off the pace in the first couple of laps, trying to find their footing, because it's been effectively over an hour since they were last in the car, and that's if they got a bit of a track time during qualifying. So definitely having just one driver in the team can help, at least in the short term, once that second stint gets underway. Another thing maybe to bring up is whether we're going to be seeing any double stints on the tyres, because 1 hour is not enough to take all of the life out of the tyres, and maybe some teams will decide to risk it for a slightly shorter pit stop, but it could leave them very vulnerable towards the end of the race.
Yeah, you put the tyres to quite a bit of load around this track. There's a lot of high-speed corners. There's quite a few straights as well where the tyres do get some sort of respite, but when you're travelling at nearly 200 miles per hour down some of these straights, you're still going to be asking a lot of those tyres. So it all comes down to how the car is set up. It's going to be relatively slippery, so it's not going to have as much aero as we go to some other tracks, which means the tyres have to work harder to keep up the speed through the corners. So it's going to be a real compromise here. I have no idea whether these tyres will make it to the end, but I'm sure the drivers will be running through their race sims and they'll be comfortable knowing which way or the other. They'll either change their tyres at the pit stop, they know that, or they'll know with confidence that they can make it to the end. That's up to them, and of course we shall find out very, very shortly. First up though, we've got half an hour of qualifying.
And we are going to be making our way into qualifying. 30 minutes of drivers essentially pushing to the absolute limit. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake, you can reset into the pits, and that's also something to keep your eyes out for as well. If you see a driver pulling off on the track and essentially the car disappearing, is resetting to the pits and heading out for another run, which does mean that we're going to see even more hot laps than we otherwise would have.
Yeah, it's going to be very fast-paced. You're going to be making sure that you've got everything under control there, and we shall see how it all turns out. But of course, you've still got to put in that out lap first, so it's not a get out of jail free. If you mess up your lap there, you can press escape, you can come back to the pit lane, but you've still got the out lap to do, and that's going to be roughly 1 minute 40, depending on how much traffic there is, and also depending on, you know, how much traffic is around you, trying to get your place in free air around this 5-kilometre circuit. So we'll have to see how that all plays out, but I'm looking forward to seeing how quick these cars can truly be.
Another thing that I do want to bring up, and I'm kind of interested to see what drivers do, is essentially how much emphasis do they put on having a very light fuel load for their hot laps, because sometimes you'll see a driver putting in just enough fuel to be able to do one hot lap. Other times you might see a driver just wanting to get a bit more of a rhythm for some of their qualifying laps, maybe putting in 3 or 4 laps of fuel, putting in 2 to 3 hot laps before coming into the pits and then going out for another next set of runs. And with half an hour of qualifying, plenty of times for teams to let both drivers put in some qualifying laps as well.
As we head up towards the final corner now, in towards the 11th corner of this historic track, and you can see the wheels trying to spin up at the rear then on the exit for Pierluca Amato. He now makes his way on towards the start finish line and on towards this long straight down in towards the Rettifilio chicane here. You've got to really pick out your braking spots here down in towards the first corner. Braking now from roughly 240 kilometers per hour all the way down in towards the 60s there as you try and negotiate through that Rettifilio chicane. Back onto the power you will go then and on towards Curva Grande here. Bit of banking through this long right-hander which helps you carry even more speed through and actually can save the tyres a little bit, saves them going through all of that energy before you then have to straighten the car up, pick out your braking point now for the Roger chicane. Down the gears in towards second place. Watch out for those sleeping policemen that they can really punish the car then on through the power and up through the gears as we head towards the first Lesmo.
And this is where we were talking about potentially seeing some of that understeer. A fresh set of boots at the moment for Pierluca Amato. No understeer to even see. But one of the things that really stood out to me, that braking down into the first chicane, Kieran, you could see the amount of twitchiness in the steering wheel as he tried to keep the car facing in the right direction. So much lateral motion going through the car as well. Down now into Ascari again, late on the brakes, turning in early. You can use up so much curb through the left and the right, and it is the easy or the best way, the quickest way to take Ascari, opening up the steering as much as possible. And now it's just Parabolica remaining.
Parabolica is all that's left now, but it is still a fantastic corner. Once again, building up the speed, then 166 kph as you then hit the anchors into third gear and trying to make sure you try and steering, bite the car, then get the grip as you then roll through the gears then and up towards that start finish line, keeping to the right hand side for the shortest possible run to the line, and that is a 1:48.0 for the first lap of the session from Pierluca Amato.
1:48.0, and when you remember the times that we were seeing in practice, Kieran, those were mid-49s. Pierluca Amato just holding a little something in store, sandbagging if you will. And now the question is, who from the rest of the field can challenge Pierluca, who can get towards the 48s, dare I say a 47.
Christian Sendle here in towards the second Lesmo, onto the power and really kissing that grass on the exit of the second Lesmo then as he makes his way through in towards the underneath the old banking then would rise now up towards Ascari if you like. Down the gears through here, through turns 8, 9 and 10, and it's really, you've got to be keeping your wits about you through there because as we already saw in practice, it is so easy to have the back end starting to twitch on you. You've got to have the absolute precise entries, the precise movement on your steering wheel. Keep that car in check then. Sendle making it around Parabolica on his flying lap. Once again back onto the power and approaching the start finish line. Let's see what this could be from Christian Sendle in the Outlaw Racing machine. It's third fastest then, a 49.2 from Sendle as his first lap of the session.
One lap done then for Christian Sendle, a 49.2 and 3/10 of Dario Barzaghi. This is Alex Ciolato. What can he do across the line? It is only a 50.9, so he's just essentially having a bit of a cool down lap, maybe a bit of a mistake before he goes again for what is his third hot lap of the session.
Absolutely, yeah. So 150.7, as you rightfully said there, just getting a lap under his belt, and still plenty of this session to go get a better lap time up there on the board. It's always nice to have a little bit of a delta to know what you're capable of, and know it's always nice to see that delta drop into the green as you pass lap by lap. But it's always encouraging to know that you are on a better lap. We're seeing here he makes his way now up towards the Roger chicane, trying to make sure the car turns in, looks pretty much on rails through there, back onto the power and heading up towards the first Lesmo then, and you see the drivers get so so close to the grass either side of the racetrack, and then when there is a little bit of astroturf beyond the curb, they will absolutely use that. There's not many options here to try and extend the track as far as possible at Monza, because as you see all around you here as we head through the Curva del Serrallo, there is not much margin for error here. You can run side by side here, but you've got to have such a lot of faith, because that Armco on the right hand side is never far away.
Ciolato still pushing, and through Ascari it all looks neat and tidy. Runs a bit wide on exit, and I think that might have been an invalidation. Either way, Ciolato a second up on his personal best, so this is looking to be a mid 49 if he can keep it together through Parabolica.
Absolutely trying to now just find that point of grip, then get the power down. A little bit twitchy coming out of Parabolica, and he goes to the right hand side of the track. Meanwhile, Pierluca Amato is maybe using a little bit of slipstream as he makes his way down the start finish straight and puts in a 47.7 as our new fastest lap time of the session. That is a great lap time, and helped by no end through the little bit of slipstream he was getting there from Ciolato there.
And good to see as well the teammates just helping each other out. It wouldn't have been the biggest of slipstreams. I doubt he even made, what, a 1/10 of a second of difference, but it will make that slight difference. And in racing, millimeters can essentially be the difference between being in second or in first. As Ciolato making his way into the Roger chicane. Luca Princi is on a pretty good lap right now in the number 27 car. He's actually nearly a second up on his personal best, which is that 49.7, which he did on the most recent lap. As there's someone in the gravel on the exit of Lesmo 1, not quite sure who that is. It's one of the McLarens.
Not great way to start your qualifying session, but I mean, it can only go up from here, can't it? 21 minutes to go in this session, as we see Ciolato there making his way underneath the old banking, and it's actually quite a sad story, that the old banking, of course, it's been so underused and so not maintained that it's actually starting to come away. It's no longer, and it will never be fit for service, unfortunately, with all the concrete, the very famous 30-degree plus, even approaching 40-degree angle corner there of the banking where the old oval used to be. Sadly, it's gone into disrepair. There's grass and roots growing through the cracks of that fabled concrete. And just to see the track itself, if you're ever in Monza, you're technically not supposed to ever be on the banking, but people do find a way.
Christian Sendle makes his way then through Curva Grande. His current best, a 49.2. Last time around, a 49.3, a 10th shy of his current best, and 3/10 down on Dario Barzaghi. And we'll see whether Christian Sendle can improve any more on this lap. Currently, he's a 10th up on his PB.
Bad at the moment, but now that you've pointed that out, Yusuf, I don't know if he's listening into the stream, but you might have just put him off there. Do call that the curse of the commentator, as a little bit wide coming out of the second Lesmo there, but we've seen plenty of drivers take that exact line. We'll see what happens there. Well, I think only advantage that he did have has been wiped away just through the second Lesmo alone, as he makes his way now on through Ascari then, and really trying to aggressively turn that car in. The back end flicking out of him almost, going in towards Ascari, but he managed to gather it up, and now on towards the straight up towards the Parabolica corner, then this famous long right-hander that is, you're just waiting in age to try and put the power down, albeit you get a bit of understeer if you leave it, if you put the accelerator on too early. Bit of astroturf, if you like, on that left-hand side to try and help you gain a little bit of speed out of the corner, and Sendle comes across the line and does improve on his lap time. Not on position, remains fourth place, but a new fastest lap for himself, a 49.105.
We can see the timing tower as well. Right now, Pierluca Amato absolutely flying. Fastest man on circuit by a second. After that, it's pretty close, actually. You're looking at half a second separating from second all the way down to fifth. Still waiting for Marcello Bonacorsi and Alessio Cataneo to complete their laps. And we'll see where they feed in relative to the 7 drivers who have currently finished their lap.
Yeah, Absolutely, and a couple of drivers out there on a flying lap. Sendle is on another one. He was a 10th up through the first sector, but seems to have lost a little bit of delta through this middle sector. It's nip and tuck whether he'll improve on this lap. We shall have to wait and see. Back onto the power out of the second Lesmo. Also on flying laps, then looking to try and get an improvement is the 34 car Wojciech Dvorak. Somewhere out there on circuit. It's currently 2/10 up on his delta right now, so he's absolutely trying to get everything out of the car. It will be enough for a mid 49 there as Sendle once again sends it through Ascari, and that back end is holding on for dear life through there.
There's a reason why he's got his own little hashtag, which he calls #SendleIt. And usually that's about sending it down the inside of someone, but he's sending it in qualifying as well at the moment. And let's see. Well, this lap isn't going to be great. He's nearly 2 seconds down on his personal best. So it's all about setting himself up to go for another lap or diving it on into the pit lane.
Yeah, wise decision there. Just get on a fresh set of this, because it did look like that maybe the rear tyres are just being asked slightly too much then. So makes his stop and then comes back into the pit box then. Dvorak, meanwhile, is half a second up at the moment on his delta. We're on board then with Cataneo then, up into second place with a 48.3, heading down in towards the Rettifilo chicane.
Nice and tidy, and the Rettifilo chicane is one of the corners on the circuit where so much time can be gained. You think you're doing the corner completely right, and then you just change your line slightly, maybe brake a bit earlier or a bit later, get that front end turned in a little bit more aggressively, and all of a sudden you find yourself coming out of the chicane 3/10 up on your PB.
Absolutely. I did mention Dvorak before, who was on a flying lap. There was a reason why, though, because his last lap was invalidated. So he stays on his 49.8. Would have set a 49.3. Amazingly, half a second would have still kept him in 7th place, but not by much at that point. So the pace is definitely there. He's just got to keep all 4 wheels on that grey stuff.
So we're just keeping an eye on Wojciech Dvorak as well. He's a 3/10 up on his personal best. Currently a 49.8. He actually improved on that set, a 49.4, but I believe he invalidated it. And he's currently sitting at 5/10 down from Simone Vacirca. Whether he can close that gap down, we'll have to see. Dario Barzaghi also improving as well. 3/10 up, and actually as he crosses the line he jumps ahead of Prinzi and up into a 3rd place by 1/10 of a second.
A very nice lap then. 48.6 him now onto the 3rd place position, and he instantly backs out of that lap because his delta just goes through the roof at that point into the red. So he's clearly happy with that one for now, and he'll come back to the pit lane, fresh set of tyres, and go once again. Maybe even he'll cool down those tyres for a lap. Just see we'll see what they're like after that, and then go for another lap on a set of scrub tyres, because at that point you've got a set of tyres now that have been through a heat cycle. So in theory now you should have one lap to just cool the tyres down again, and it should be in theory easier to bring them back up to temperature when you then want to switch them on again as Wojciech Dvorak comes across the line. This one does count. This one is again a 49.370. Keeps him in 7th place for now.
So sadly for Wojciech Dvorak, he's going to have to find a little bit more time. Either way, promising signs. He is only a 10th off Simone Vacirca and then a further 10th off from Christian Sendle. But I want to look at one particular driver, Alex Ciolato, because this will be his very first lap, or his first representative lap time, because at the moment he is struggling to get under the 50s, and I'm fairly sure he's quicker than that. But Alex Ciolato having a bit of a moment, I think, actually on the exit of the Rettifilo chicane.
Watching on there as well as then the 42 of Ciolato making his way now up towards the Roger chicane, and of course those sleeping policemen, well, they don't sleep unless you hit them, of course, and then they truly awaken, and that's when you feel their wrath. But he's now making his way in towards the first Lesbo, trying to keep that car under wraps then. But of course we're seeing that a lot with these drivers, that they will use those curbs and they will use that AstroTurf on the left hand side of the curb, although I think then for Ciolato that was slightly overboard, and he's caught the gravel and gone wide with it, because of course once you collect the gravel, that's it, it's got you then, it's trapping you.
Now Pierluca Amato is pushing Alex Gelato. Is back in the pits. He's going to have to think about how he can improve on his lap. But Pierluca Amato, sadly for him, he's not quite improving, a 10th down on his PB, which is currently sitting at a 47.7. Little puff of gravel as he runs a tad wide on the exit of Lesmo 2 and makes his way down the hill towards the Sky. Now 2/10 down on his personal best. Still being consistent though is Pierluca Amato.
Yeah, still at the top of the table, still with that 147 and all the sevens after that, as he now makes his way up towards the Parabolica corner, trying to just get past the Aston Martin there, and now tackling the final quarter. Through we go. He is a couple of tenths off on this lap, so he will be of course looking to go again. And let's see what his lap time will be as he comes across the line. Will he be able to just sort of claw back a couple of tenths as he makes his way towards the line? It's difficult to do. 48.0 on that last lap, but by the looks of it, he looks up for it, he looks in the zone and ready to go for yet another lap.
One more hurrah around the circuit. Just over 10 minutes of qualifying remaining for the opening round of the Sprint Series Season 2 on Assetto Corsa Competizione. And currently it's the BMWs locking out the front row of the grid. Pierluca Amato from Alessio Cataneo. But Pierluca Amato in a league of his own right now. We kind of saw it a little bit in Season 1. The only team that was able to really come close to Pierluca Amato, and then Tiziano Brioni, who was his teammate, was Euronics. And it was only really the two drivers from Euronics, and those two teams just in a class of their own. And it's starting to look that maybe Season 2 will be a repeat of that dominance.
Well, it's very, very early days, Yusuf. Very early days. I mean, that's quite a bold claim you're putting out there for the first qualifying session. We're not even through the first qualifying session of the season, Yusuf, and you've already put that bold claim out there. But, I mean, 47.7 compared to Alessio Cataneo's 48.3. Well, that's a huge gap at the moment. Still 10 minutes on the clock at least for anybody to see what they can come up with. But flying through Ascari there is Pierluca Amato, who's currently got 2/10 on his own delta.
This is a phenomenal lap from Pierluca Amato, and it might be enough to take him into the 47.5s, dare I say 47.4s. Through Parabolica on the power as early as he can. Has a little bit more track space that he could use up, and now it's just the shortest line to the timing line. And Pierluca Amato 47.492. Wow.
Wow, indeed. That's a heck of a lap time. That's going to take some beating as well. I just don't know if anybody can get that close again. Alessio Cataneo did get within a second of the provisional pole position time. It's now back up to almost a second once again. So Cataneo there. That's one of those Schumacher laps we used to call them all the way growing up there. That, you know, it would be an achievable lap time, and then Schumacher would turn it into a very unachievable one. A blink of an eye, and that for Pierluca Amato at 47.4 looks like it's going to be the one to clinch pole position once and for all. Less than 10 minutes ago, Alessio Cataneo was up on his delta up until the bridge there and up towards Ascari. Maybe he can try and buy a little bit more time here. Through we go. Just keeping one eye on that delta and the other eye on Cataneo attacking, going through Ascari, attacking those curbs as well. Onto the power and up through the gears as we make our way up towards Parabolica once again for Cataneo, then flying the anchors through that final corner. Then patience needed before you apply that power, otherwise you will understeer off the circuit. And the shortest possible run to the line. Is this going to be an improvement then for Cataneo as he crosses the line? It is a very slight improvement, 48.297. It is his personal best. It obviously doesn't change his position, but it secures second place at least a little bit more by a few hundredths.
And a good lap from Cataneo, as you mentioned, securing that spot. What can Simone Vacirca do? He was 1 to 2 tenths up going into the Parabolica, and he's going to be able to find a 10th, a 49.2, still a 10th shy of Christian Sendle, but he puts a bit more time between himself and Wojtek Dvorak in P7.
Let's see how that all plays out then, because he's not got the rest of the lap to go now. He's through the Rettifiglio chicane and seeing now what he can do through here, Vacirca. We've got Ciolato here, who's nearly a second up on his Delta, which will take him right into the battle once again. I'm just watching him now. He's on the exit of Ascari, and up towards Parabolica he will go, nearly a second up on his Delta, which again would take him well and truly into that battle all the way through the final quarter. We will go riding on board with him there. You see the understeer there, the car full lock to the right, but the car still wanted to go straight on. Back onto the power now in the Aston Martin as he heads up his way towards the line, and through Parabolica there he did lose a lot of that Delta. Still his personal best of 50.295 there, but I think he lost a lot of time through Parabolica, and that moment of understeer may have just been a contributing factor.
Sadly for Ciolato, still unable to break into the 49s. Alessio Cataneo is improving once again. He's got a few more tenths in his lap. So does Simone Vacirca. I'm going to keep an eye on Vacirca, because if he can make this lap count, it will jump him ahead of Christian Sendle and up into a 5th position.
So Vacirca is going to be watched on by Yusuf then, seeing if he can try and get his way up into the top 5. Ciolato then once again is going to try and put in another lap. Sendle also out there on a flying lap, but whatever Delta he had is now just about lost, unfortunately. So seeing what he can do later on in the lap perhaps.
Meanwhile, heading into turn 1 is Vacirca, able to find a 48.752 with that lap, at 200ths quicker than Luca Princi, and up into P4. So good stuff from Vacirca, but now Christian Sendle himself is improving, currently sitting in P6 as he makes his way into Ascari. You can see how much curve he takes. This is a full send on the lap, full commitment through Ascari, and on the exit of Ascari, taking up as much of the curve as he dares without invalidating his lap time. I think he did drop a 10th, and I don't know if this is going to be enough to close the gap towards Princi.
We shall wait and see. He's only got Parabolica to go though, but he's at a much better Parabolica this time around as he makes his way up towards the line. Shortest possible run up towards the line. It would have been a great lap, 49.7, which would have put him straight into contention to try and get off of that 8th place spot. Unfortunately, it wasn't a valid lap, so he'll have to go again.
One more time round. 5.5 minutes remaining in the session. Still time for drivers to peel into the pits, put on a set of a set of fresh rubber before heading back on out. Maybe just adding a little bit more fuel to the car as well. Luca Princi is on an out lap. Most of the other drivers are currently on a hot lap. Marcello Bonacorsi is in the pits. He'll be coming back out of the pits to start his final set of runs as well shortly.
Yeah, we're coming in towards that crunch time in qualifying now. Less than 5 minutes to run in the session, and you're just trying to pick up where could you pick up more time as the in-game sim. It is starting to get just a little bit darker, so it will have an effect on how the track behaves. That track temperature is starting to drop down, Yusuf.
And it was at 25, I think it was at 26, now down to 24 degrees Celsius. An 8 times multiplier, or an 8 times time multiplier in effect for qualifying. Qualifying starts at 5 p.m. in game time, and it is already 8:30 with darkness falling on us here in the Tuscan Hills, which is where Monza is located. Alex Ciolato making his way into Parabolica. He's a 10th down on his PB, but he's gaining time, running a little bit wide on corner exit. I don't know if he's actually gained time there or if he has dropped a little bit more. A 49.715, his personal best. Oh, sorry, actually, that was the previous time round, so he's matching his personal best. I think he went a couple of hundredths quicker.
He did, yes. Remember the last time around, that 49 you saw there, that was an invalid lap, so that would mean he had to run again. But yeah, looking at well, I am anyway, at Pierluca Amato. Just his timing screens right now hasn't set a better lap just yet, but he's mightily close, within a tenth of his own best lap time throughout the entire session. 47.492 is the time to beat. The next closest time is Vacherka, a 48.6. 1.2 seconds separates the front two on that front row of the grid. It's a mammoth amount of time.
Is absolutely incredible. One of the weird things that I'm seeing right now is they're saying to me that Alessio Cataneo has gone quicker than Vacherka, but he's behind on what I am seeing. But on the timing in the top left of all of your corners, you can see how close it is. A 2/10 from Vacherka in second, down to Christian Sendle in P5. There's a Dario Barzaghi out of Parabolica across the line. What will this be? A 48.770, a tenth shy of his current best.
I'm just wondering here if Cataneo here, yes, he's got, we've... That's right. No, I'm just going to keep talking. I'm going to keep waffling, and hopefully I'll resolve the problem for myself. Pierluca Amato, though, still with that 47.492 at the top of the table. Simone Vacherka in second place with a 48.6 as far as I can see. We've got it's just over 2 minutes, or just under 2 minutes to go. So we're getting to that point now where if you start to cross the line, that's going to be your last chance, as Pierluca Amato completely bails out on the Roger chicane. He balls over to the right-hand side of the track, comes back to the pit lane, and for Pierluca, that's not going to be enough time to leave the pit lane and go for a full out lap. So his qualifying session is over. 47.492 is the time to beat.
Right now, no one else able to get into the 47s. Alessio Cataneo got extremely close with a 48.0, but just a little bit shy of that final bit more that he needed to get into the 47s. Dario Barzaghi, Luca Prinzi, Christian Sendle, Wojtek Dvorak, all on hot laps, as is actually Marcello Bonacorsi. And this is actually Marcello's first lap. Let's take a look then and see what Marcello can pull off.
It's always interesting to see someone on their flying lap, with their first lap of the session being the final lap that they can actually set. So let's see what Marcello is made of then. Bonacorsi out there on a flying lap right now, as there is Barzaghi pulling off to the right hand side after setting his lap. His qualifying session is now completed. Just a handful of drivers left out on the circuit. Vacherka is one of them, who's making his way through Parabolica and onwards now to start his flying lap with seconds remaining on the clock. And going in towards qualifying, you do want to be one of the last, because it gives you the best opportunity to get ahead, and it sets the target early on. So Vacherka then, as far as I can see, should be one of the last to cross the line next time around when the checkered flag is displayed. And speaking of the checkered flag, there it is.
The checkered flag is down, so Vacherka was able to start one more push. Alessio Cataneo, sadly, no longer on the timing sheets. I think they have dropped out of the service. I'm not quite sure what is going on, because otherwise Alessio Cataneo would have been sitting very pretty in second on the front row of the grid. As Marcello Bonacorsi has joined in one of the other BMWs and would have made the third, as Simone Vacherka just carries too much speed into the Roger chicane and ends up going a little wide and drops a whole bunch of time. And I think he's going to have to pull out of his lap as well, which means that is pretty much qualifying done and dusted.
Yeah, and Marcello Bonacorsi there, well, he only had one lap, and he only took one lap to get onto the front row of the grid. A 48.3 is good enough to take his place on the front row of the grid. And Yusuf, well, pole position decided a long time ago in that BMW, Pierluca Amato, but great lap from Marcello Bonacorsi there to put himself on the front row.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic from Bonacorsi. And he'll be lining up alongside Pierluca Amato on the front row of the grid for the opening round of the sprint series. And as you can all see on your screen, the drivers lining up on the grid as we will be getting underway in just over a minute's time. And Pierluca Amato, he's got a clear line of sight towards the turn one, or at least he will, Kieran, once he gets through Parabolica.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting down in towards turn one, that is for sure. But you've got to have your wits about you. You cannot just go for a move straight up the inside and think everybody's gonna predict it or everybody's gonna see it coming. You still have to act accordingly. Make sure you get through the first chicane at the very least before you start thinking about going crazy later on in the race. We shall see how hectic the Rettifilo chicane becomes in just under 30 seconds time, I guess.
And it all comes down to who wants to be bravest onto the brakes. And you have to remember, drivers on cold tyres, cold brakes, very easy to misjudge braking when you're going into turn one with a full tank of fuel, having literally 2 minutes ago been in the car, low fuel, setting a hot lap.
Yeah, you've just got to make sure you keep that your noggin switched on. That's going to be the main thing. Remember that you've got a full race fuel on board, so go thinking that it's going to be the lightest car in existence, like it was, as you said, only a couple of minutes ago. That means your braking distance is going to be increased, your centre of gravity is going to be a little bit off than what you'd probably prefer. But as we start rolling here towards the line, the dawn of the second season of the Sprint Series is upon us, Yusuf.
It is indeed, and it is Pierluca Amato, your reigning champion, who lines up on the front row of the grid on the inside towards the Rettifilo chicane. What can Alessio Cataneo do about it? Pierluca Amato getting ready to go. Cataneo a little bit further behind. The gap between the pair of them is absolutely enormous. You can see Barzaghi next as we see from the helicopter shot, and Pierluca Amato has gone straight to the inside. Goes Cataneo as the green Mercedes of Barzaghi might look to the outside down into the Rettifilo chicane. How late on the brakes does he dare go? Not quite late enough, or maybe it is. Now on the outside, side by side, and Barzaghi is going to be forced to back out of it as Princey slots in behind in P4.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good start from Amato. Then he was able to, it just looks like he was so far ahead of Cataneo that he must have been right on the bubble of jumping that start, but so far he hasn't. He's able to carry on his merry way, and he'll be looking to try and extend that lead at the front. All of the drivers then making their way through the Rettifilo chicane. Got a little bit dicey here and there, but on the whole, a very, very clean start from all involved.
And you can see Luca Princey getting right onto the back of Circa as they make their way through Lesmo 1 and Lesmo 2. But on the main picture is Pierluca Amato and Marcello Bonacorsi starting to pull away as we see the drivers already starting to get into that gravel on the exit of Lesmo 2, pushing the limits of the car. Opening a lap of the race, riding on board with Princey. Maybe could have a little think down the inside into the chicane, but decides against it. Probably the smart thing to do. It's a long race ahead of all of the drivers, and it wouldn't make sense to go for a dive this early on.
Yeah, just make sure you get through the first lap, make sure you warm the tyres up, warm the brakes up as well, and make sure that you're comfortable with that race fuel load. Just making sure you remember how heavy the car is going through to some of these corners. Lumbering would be a very not nice word to use, but in a sense of how much extra weight these cars are carrying now, it's going to be changing that centre of gravity, that shift of weight, that shift of momentum through the corners as well. It is going to be a stark difference to what it was in qualifying.
This is Princey going for the move. He's closing in with the slipstream. He's having a little look to the inside. Green Mercedes in front of him as we see the back shot from Pierluca Amato as the gap starting to extend between himself and Bonacorsi. Bonacorsi jumping in to start and replacing Alessio Cataneo, who I believe it was Cataneo who put in, no, I'm mistaking myself there, but it is Bonacorsi who is staying within touching distance of Amato so far.
So far, so good from the top two. They've managed to build a gap from everyone else behind. Barzagli rounding off our podium right now, but you can see there is this gap between our top two. And you can see now Pierluca Amato here, maybe with a car that's more comfortable with a low fuel setup, because he's not quite getting away from Bonacorsi as much as maybe he would like. Bonacorsi staying within touching distance at the moment and building that gap from everybody else. This is going to help them both down the line, because as they're battling each other now, the further they can get down the road. But Cherka and Barzagli are trying to battle away for position as well. That's going to buy the top two more time as well, that they can just cash in at the end of the race.
Something else that would probably be good to remember is that Marcello Bonacorsi might have a lot less fuel in the car. For all we know, Pierluca Amato might be looking at a 70-minute stint and then having a shorter stint at the end. Maybe Bonacorsi is only looking at a 45-minute opening stint and then going very long in the second stint. But you can see from Simone Vacirca, Luca Princi right on his rear end as they make their way out of a Parabolica, and it is a much better exit for Princi as a pair of them side by side. Aston Martin against Aston Martin, and the two, I believe it is the two Renegade Sim Racing work group teammates, won't put up too much of a fight against each other, but Vacirca might hold it as Princi has a think about going down the inside, but in the end decides just to slot back in behind his teammate.
Yeah, good battling so far, running side by side down the straight, as you'll see there. Really in formation at this point, at this early stage of the race. They know they're not going to go too wild just yet, but maybe a move from Princi was on in towards the Rettifilo chicane, but he just wasn't feeling it down in towards the braking zone. As you say, tucks in behind his teammate once again, and I'm sure these two will be battling more and more as this race unfolds.
The other thing to remember is they've got Barzagli ahead of them in their line of sight as well. They don't want to hold each other up and allow that Mercedes to pull away. They've also got Christian Sendle not too far behind, so if they battle, not only does Barzagli get further away, but Christian Sendle will get right onto their rear end and then start joining in this battle, and then it just gets worse and worse for them for their endurance.
Yeah, it sort of compounds at that point, doesn't it? You have these troubles and they start snowballing, and eventually it just, almost comes undone towards the end of the race then. But that was Vacirca getting a little bit tail happy coming out of Ascari then. It might open up an opportunity for Luca Princi, because he knows now if he gets Parabolica right, here we go then through in towards the 11th turn, back onto the power we will go. If he gets this right, he's got another move to set up down the start finish straight. Princi in that slipstream then of Simone Vacirca. Where will he go this time around? Will he go to the right hand side? He's in that slipstream for now, maybe thinking a move in towards the Rettifilo chicane, down in towards the first corner. He moves to the right hand side, leaves his braking late. Can he make the corner? Yes he does. So a good move then from Princi up into fourth place ahead of Simone Vacirca then. I did second guess whether he left his braking too late. He just about made the corner. Good move from Princi.
Yeah, fantastic stuff from Princi, and Vacirca not really putting up too much of a fight on it either. You can see on the instant replay as well, just down the inside, Vacirca nice and early on the brakes and not putting up too much of a fight.
Too much of a fight, but it means that Princi moves up a position, and now he can try and start to focus his attack on Dario Barzagli up ahead in that lime green Mercedes. Through they go in towards the second Lesmo, back onto the power. Our two leaders are still trying to run away with this race, still within touching distance of each other at the moment. They're heading their way in towards Ascari now, but good battle developing here for 4th, 5th and 6th. Sendle here in 6th place. Didn't have the greatest qualifying, and the race start didn't go his way either. He finds himself in 6th place, but there's still plenty of this race to unravel right now. And put it this way, Yusuf, Luca Princi on this lap right now, he's 8/10 quicker than on the previous lap. He's been unleashed here, and he's really trying to charge down Barzagli.
And when they come across the line, we'll get a chance to see exactly what it is, and we get to compare their lap times. And sure, Luca Princi did have to overtake his Barzagli had to No, it was Princey who overtook his teammate of Chilka, but Princey across the line a 49.6, Barzaghi a 49.4, but Princey definitely lost at least a couple of tenths into turn 1, and the gap between them is looking like it is about 3 seconds. Still a long way to go in the race, barely 10 minutes even completed so far, and Princey can get his head down and try to close his gap down to P3.
Yeah, he definitely can, and we'll have to wait and see, for example, what the pit stops will do. How early do you pit? And you know, at that point, you'll have some teams here that will be running 2-driver teams. Some of them, like Pierluca Amato, is a solo runner, so that's going to play into effect coming down in towards the closing stages. We'll see how a difference in driver can help the team, or maybe in some cases it can hinder. You know, we were talking about, Yusuf, in the practice, that sometimes if you're in that rhythm, you really want to stay in that rhythm, and 2 hours seems to be a good solid time for a stint. It's a good solid time in an endurance, for example, to keep just pumping in those lap times. If you sub out a driver an hour afterwards, well, it takes a couple of laps for the new driver in the car to get used to the car as it is right now. Oh, that's a bit tail happy from Luca Prizzi there, just about gathered that one up. A hair racing moment from him, but he's able to keep control of his beast of an Aston Martin. What I was saying was, well, I've interrupted myself, Yusuf. I've sort of lost the train of thought. I'll hand back to you and hope you can pick up where I left off.
Well, one of the things I did want to touch on, which you were talking about, was when we get to the pit stops and kind of comparing essentially the 1-driver teams to the 2-driver teams, because I think it does come down to short term versus long term. In the short term, if you've got a 1-driver team, they're going to be performing a little bit better after the pit stop, but eventually those drivers will start to get a little bit knackered. Especially if, like Christian Sendle, you've been in the car for the 30 minutes of qualifying, then an hour of the race. But thankfully for Christian Sendle, he's got a teammate he can hand to, so that gives him a bit of a chance to take a breather. I mean, Sandro Van Sand will be jumping into the car, but in those opening few laps, that's where he will be struggling, trying to get to grips with, well, the grip levels on circuit, with the car, with the fuel level, the tyre conditions, and there's so much more to it as well.
You see, now that you've brought back into the case of, oh yeah, the driver taking over, then I realised that was my train of thought and I'd missed it. Wrong platform, I guess. Our leader is still Pierluca Amato at the moment, steadily building the gap between himself and Marcello Bonacorsi here. Healthy gap between the two of them at the moment, and then it is Dario Barzaghi in third place in that lime green unmistakable Mercedes that will be lurking in the distance. Luca Prinzi in fourth place at the moment, Simone Vacerca in fifth, Christian Sendle in sixth place, Wojciech Dvorak in seventh, and Alex Ceolato rounds off our top 8 drivers. Healthy gaps really between them all at this moment, but the battles where we really need to be focusing on, 5th, 6th at the moment, seems to be the closest battle on this grid, as well as that. Actually, I'm taking a second look at it, it looks like the gap for 7th place looks even better at the moment, so keep an eye wherever you look right up and down the field, Yusuf. There seems to be something to watch, which is always a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Pierluca Amato not really being able to fully gap Bonacorsi. He's got himself a rather nice lead, 2 and a bit seconds between himself and the number 475 car. But it is this 3-way battle for third that we're really keeping our eyes out on. Dario Barzaghi from Luca Prinzi, and then Simone Vacerca and Christian Sendle not too far behind. So I guess that is a 4-way battle. And then you got Wojciech Dvorak ahead of Alex Ceolato, and only a couple of seconds between the pair of them. Ceolato was very close to the back end of the McLaren, but the gap has stretched out over the last couple of minutes.
It has, yes, as drivers start to wind into their stints at the moment, just making sure they find the rhythm and just get the best lap times they can every single lap, as Vacerca then 5th place right now. And of course, Prinzi did overtake him a few laps ago. But Sendle is onto the grass then between the two Lesmos and finds himself a round. Just got onto the grass there, and the car just absolutely did not like it whatsoever. And he did have a kiss of the wall just for good measure as well. Just a lapse of concentration for Sendle there.
And it's so easy to happen. We talked about the understeer we might be seeing through Lesmo 1, and that's essentially what happened to Sendle. Got a bit of understeer, went wide onto the gravel, tried to keep the foot in, and then the rear end just spins up, and we just catch the end of that replay, and you can see how long that car was tank slapping for.
Yeah, it took out a lot of polystyrene on the way to its eventual destination of racing just the wrong way going in towards the second Lesmo. But yeah, it's a frustrating one for Sendle there. He knows now that, you know, he had the slight kiss of the wall as well, so there might be a little bit of damage to that car to manage now. But at the moment, he's still pressing on now. He knows he needs to make up for lost ground.
There will be a fair bit of work to do. Christian Sendle, 4 seconds or so behind Alex Ciolato. And we know that he is a little bit quicker than Ciolato, qualified ahead of him, qualified ahead of Wojtek Dvorak as well. So we might be having a bit of a battle on our hands. 15 minutes nearly down of this race, 1/8 of the way through, and it is Pierluca Amato who still leads by about 2 seconds from Marcello Bonacorsi.
Absolutely, and I'm sure pick this action up. We're going to go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, more action on the opening round of the second season of the GTR 24H Sprint Series.
GTR 24H Sprint Series Season 2, Monza, is presented in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, A-Stick Sim Sport, ESTV, and MotorVision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
to the GTR 24H series, the second season here at the first round at Monza, and Pierluca Amato still at the top of the order. Marcello Bonacorsi, we're watching here, making his way through in towards Ascari. Gaps really stayed at roughly 2 seconds, and a shower of sparks as he clouds the sleeping policeman on the curb there. Well, it was 2.5 seconds. It's going to be slightly more than that now. Yusuf bin Sahari.
Yeah, and something we actually missed out on during the break is we get a little replay of exactly what happened to Bonacorsi. It's all looking decent, but runs a little bit wide through the first part of Ascari, and then wide again through the third part, which carries him wide on corner exit as well. So just a bit too hot from Bonacorsi. Might have picked up a cheeky little invalidation as well, a warning. And if drivers get 4 warnings, then they end up picking up a drive-through penalty. So make sure you don't cut the track too much. Sometimes you can get away with a little corner cut and it just tells you your lap's invalidated. But if you do a big one, then you get a warning.
Yeah. It seems like rubbing salt in the wounds, though, because you've clouded the curb and you've sent everything in a shower of sparks, and then all of a sudden, then you're slapped with a warning when you've lost all that time. It just seems like rubbing salt in the wounds to me. But hey ho, it is what it is. Bonacorsi, meanwhile, still in second place. Gap is now just under 4 seconds between himself and the race leader Pierluca Amato. There in the distance, just coming out of the Roger chicane, was third place driver Dario Barzagli then in that lime green at Mercedes. And if you're just tuning in and if you're wondering how all of that polystyrene is all over the place between the two Lesmos, well, my goodness, you missed a moment from Christian Sendle.
Yeah, and Christian Sendle essentially ran a little bit too wide on the exit of Lesmo 1, tried to keep his foot planted and ended up spinning around, dropping to the back of the field. But while we were in our commercial break, Wojtek Dvorak made a mistake as well, and he's actually dropped to 4 seconds behind Christian Sendle, so I'm assuming he had a spin. If I had to put my money on a particular corner, it would probably be on Ascari, and Christian Sendle is now up into P7 and finds himself at 2 seconds behind Alex Ciolato.
Not bad going, considering he had that spin. He's clearly on the road to recovery at the moment, so we'll absolutely keep one eye on that one. Alex Ciolato, meanwhile, is, the gap between himself and Sendle just under a second at the moment, so it looks like it's going to be a really close battle out on track. There we are, joining onto it, in towards Parabolica. Ciolato runs deep into Parabolica. In theory, it'll give him the better exit, but it will not give him a good run through the corner whatsoever. Christian Sendle might be able to put his hashtag to good name here down the start-finish straight. Ciolato, I think, just about has the track position down in towards the Rettifilo chicane, but never rule anything out in these types of races with a very, very heavy braking zone. Ciolato holding on to that position there, but Christian Sendle is now all over the back of him. Battle here for 6th place.
You can barely see the McLaren because it is tucked right behind the Aston Martin. Through Curva Grande they go, and we can see the rear view from Alex Ciolato's Aston. And that McLaren is starting to look rather angry. The McLarens don't like being at the very back of the field, and they want to at least get one Aston Martin between the pair of them, sandwich between the pair of them. But for Christian Sendle, he's got plenty of time. After he gets past Ciolato, it's a 15-second gap up to Vacirca. And a long way to go yet in the race. Down through Lesmo 2. And Ciolato seems to get a better run. So for Christian Sendle, his next opportunity is either going to be on the exit of Ascari or down into turn 1.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very close, really, because Ascari is not really going to be your overtaking opportunity here, and even so, he would have been slightly too far back to even attempt anything through there. Ciolato making his way now through Ascari, back onto the straight now, up towards Parabolica, and yeah, he looked like he was a bit more confident than the McLaren of Christian Sendle going through Ascari there, and has pulled off just a little bit of a gap, nearly a second between the two of them as they head their way now into towards Parabolica, and all a waiting game. Then back onto the power. Two different lines being taken by the two different drivers. You see there Cialato taking a much wider line, especially midway through the corner, but you see the McLaren taking a different line and using the exit AstroTurf, if you like, all the way on the left-hand side in the later part of the corner. Both seem to work, but it looks like Christian Sendle's line, with a little bit of slipstream as well, has really helped him out.
That McLaren is absolutely insane on the brakes. The closing distance that he gains over Cialato is ridiculous. Every time he jumps on the brakes, I think he's going to just ram right into the back of the Aston Martin, and it almost happened into Ascari. That's how Christian Sendle lost so much time, incredibly late on the brakes, ends up running a little bit wide, and that's how he dropped, I think, practically half a second in one chicane.
Yeah, he's looking pretty good at the moment, but he's got to try and find a way past this renegade number 42 of Alex Cialato. Cialato seems to be very strong in some corners here, but that McLaren, as you say, on the anchors looks absolutely brilliant at the moment, and the amount that Christian Sendle was able to scrub off in such a short distance really does help him to make up for lost time. The only problem is when you're following a car, it is a lot more difficult to overtake them, because you start to see them pull away, and it's only when you get onto the anchors you get close to them again. Cialato riding the bumps there, hoping that the suspension can really take the forces that Alex is exerting through them, and it really has helped the McLaren close up, because Cialato here might have to go defensive up in towards Parabolica. The McLaren is looking for a move up the inside, but tucks back into the slipstream, coming through Parabolica. Again, two different lines being taken here. Cialato's line making sure that he tries to get the speed of the exit of the corner. The McLaren again has to tuck in down the start-finish straight.
And now it comes down to the raw grunt. Who's got more horsepower? Well, for Christian Sendle, he's got a slipstream as well as horsepower, but it is not going to be enough to close the gap. He has a little think about the inside, ends up jumping onto the brakes earlier than what we saw in the previous lap, and Cialato actually running wide, and this means Christian Sendle will get a much better run off the exit of the opening chicane and tucks right into Curva Grande. The pair of them go. Christian Sendle could maybe make the move into the Roger chicane.
Roger chicane would be a very interesting place to try and set up the corner, but that Aston Martin looks so good in a straight line, and it's able to stay ahead even with the little couple of mistakes from Alex Cialato there. If that McLaren is going to try and make its way past, it needs to be at a heavy braking zone. The only problem is the only heavy braking zone really at this circuit comes under a long straight, which favours the Aston Martin. So the McLaren here is really going to have to get the thinking cap on. Where is the best place that Christian Sendle can try and find a way past Alex Cialato? Well, it could be here through the curve del Serrallo here. Once again, they go through the slipstream. A little bit of a replay of what happened just a moment ago through the Curva Grande then, and right on the tail. That McLaren is not giving up on this position whatsoever. It is fantastic to see. Cialato right now just has that grunt of the engine to keep him ahead.
Fantastic from the pair of them, and Cialato is not giving this one away without a fight. We've seen in previous races, we've seen it in the EWC as well, that usually when we get these battles starting to form, one car will just decide, you know what, I'll jump into the pits now, I'll do it on track, but not doing the move on track, doing the move through a strategy. This time around, Christian Sendle much further back from Cialato, who will continue to defend in the gap between Christian Sendle in P7 and Simone Vacirca in P5 is just growing and growing. Nearly 20 seconds 3 laps ago, it was only 15.
It's looking pretty good as Wojciech Dvorak tries to close it lap by lap, and he's going to be helped because if these two start battling, of course, that's going to favour him and bring him into this battle to run. You were talking about how the EWC, we were seeing drivers, they would get to these battles and then they decide, right, now's the time to pit because I'm losing too much time. Here, well, they've only got to make that one mandatory stop, so there's no point trying to pit in too early because you might not have the tyres to make it to the end, and you might not even have the fuel tank really to get you there. You may have the fuel tank, but the car will be too heavy and you lose too much time. So really, that side of the strategy kind of starts to go out of the window until you really get to that halfway stage in the race. And then you can start thinking with 70 or 65 minutes to go, maybe if I stop now, I might suffer with tyres at the end, but at least I'll have track position.
One of the things I do remember from the previous season, the inaugural season of the Sprint Series, was actually Burst Esport. And they had a specific love of the Lexus. They always used to run with it. And they'd make that Lexus go about 1 hour 15, 1 hour 20 minutes into a stint before pitting, and then have a very short pit stop and be able to jump so many drivers in the process. But then again, most of the time they couldn't really do that because they were running towards the front of the field.
Yeah, but it's always nice when that strategy really does come off. There's when it comes to longer races and making sure you're on the right strategy, it is a huge challenge. But for these drivers and these teams, knowing that they've only got that one stop to make, it's just up to them when they make it. That's going to be a huge bonus and one less stressful thing to think about. Although track position at Monza, we've already seen, is going to be mighty important. Again, the McLaren gets a really good run going through the Rettifilo chicane, but the grunt and the power of the Aston Martin will once again keep him ahead. This must be so frustrating for Christian Sendle here. Whatever he's doing, no matter how hard he tries, he just cannot find a way past Cialato.
And Cialato actually outbraked himself going into that opening chicane. We saw him much wider out of a turn 1, which compromised him into turn 2. And Christian Sendle, I can't even imagine what's going through his head because he's been stuck behind this Aston Martin for so long. He's clearly quick. He was gaining about half a second a lap on the Aston, but he just can't find a way through. And as you mentioned, the grunt of that Aston Martin is just too much for the McLaren to handle. Where do you find a move? Maybe you look for something on the exit of Ascari, hope that you can kind of bait Cialato into a mistake. Maybe the same through Parabolica. We've seen Christian Sendle getting a better exit out of the final corner repeatedly.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one here for Christian Sendle to try and find his way past. As you were saying, it's trying to find where Cialato is not going to be as good. But down the straights where, you know, when you come to Monza, the one thing you think is top speed. That Aston Martin has the edge on the top speed. So whatever the McLaren has to do, Christian Sendle needs to try and find something, anything, because even with the slipstream, he's losing ground. That's not often you see that even with the slipstream, you still start to lose ground. That is how much the Aston Martin is tuned up for the straight line speeds here.
And I think this is a good point to mention, essentially one of the features of the second season of the Sprint Series when we compare it to the first season. In the opening season, drivers and teams were allowed to change their cars between events. They were allowed to essentially pick the best car for each track. Here for the second season, each driver, each team needs to stick with their one car over all 15 races. So that will mean that despite the Aston Martin being better than the McLaren here at Monza, maybe 3 races down the line or whenever it is, when we head to somewhere like Laguna Seca, maybe the McLaren is all of a sudden a lot better. And it's going to be interesting to see effectively the power dynamic between the different manufacturers, the different cars over the course of the season.
Will be, and it'll be trying to unpack and count cars that have got favourite tracks, cars that have tracks that they just cannot really get to grips with. It's going to be fascinating to see how the teams have really come to the decision of picking this particular car. Is it a case of, well, it's not so bad here, it's pretty average around all circuits, it's not really weak anywhere, or is it a fact of we are strong here, we're going to pick a car for here, and we're going to worry about other tracks when we cross that bridge?
And Wojtek Dvorak is actually into the pits. I'm not quite sure what's happened because that's very early for a pit stop. So we get a lovely shot of Cialato making his way through Parabolica, and Christian Sendle still a couple of car lengths away and too far back to have a go this time round into turn 1.
Yeah, just a little bit too far back this time around, at least. You know, those two are still going to be battling, Hammer and Tom, as we head into the, we've well past the first 30 minutes of this race. Absolutely flown by at this moment, but could be a good run here coming out of the Rettifilo chicane. Once again, Christian Sendle gets a very good exit, but there's where the grunt of the Aston Martin pulls him once again clear, and it is so frustrating for Christian Sendle. He cannot find a way through. He knows the Rettifilo chicane is a good place to try and move, but by the time that happens, the move's already gone. He's already trying to fly down the road. Although Cialato here doesn't have the greatest Roger chicane, the McLaren is once now up the inside going in towards the first Lesmo. The Aston Martin does give him the room there, but round the outside, managing to defend that position, and once again Cialato stays ahead.
And that was the best opportunity that Christian Sendle has got all race to make a move. And here we can see again, great run coming out of the Roger chicane, or maybe poor run from the Aston Martin. Almost contact between the pair of them, but Cialato left enough room, and you can see into Ascari the closing speed of Christian Sendle as it is well and truly dark here at Monza. No sign of light. Sunset has well and truly passed us, and maybe this will potentially bring in some extra pace for the McLaren. Maybe it'll make it even more difficult for Christian Sendle to find a way through.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be frustrating down to a T for Christian Sendle. Once again, back onto the power as we head our way out of Parabolica. Grunt, the engine of the Aston Martin, will keep it clear for now, although Sendle looks a lot closer than he has been on previous laps. Is this an opportunity to use those McLaren brakes to his advantage here in towards the Rettifilo chicane? Will he go for the move? He certainly looks for it, doesn't commit there, and the Aston Martin runs deep. He's missed the corner. Cialato runs straight on there, and he moves to the left-hand side of the track, and that is going to be the position for the McLaren, at least for now. These two are going to be battling through Curva Grande there, so the McLaren has got the move now up towards the Roger chicane. Is Cialato going to try and move in towards the very next series of corners? He'll be on the outside in towards the Roger chicane, but once again clouting those curbs there, and at long last for Christian Sendle in McLaren, he's got his way through.
And that was really good sportsmanship from Cialato as well, because they both ran wide. Cialato outbraked himself, and I think Christian Sendle was essentially saying, whenever Cialato brakes, I'm going to brake after that. He outbraked himself, but he managed to keep the car on the circuit, and Cialato did essentially the right thing, the moral thing, pulling over to the left, allowing Sendle through, not completely, tucked right in behind, and tried to go into the Roger chicane, but a little bit too late on the brakes, outbraked himself, and now Christian Sendle is scot-free, but the damage has been done. 20 seconds behind Vachirka is probably even more once this lap comes to a close. Meanwhile, Luca Prinzi sitting in fourth place. A gap between himself and Dario Barzaghi sitting at about 3 to 4 seconds. Still, though, relatively close from third down to fifth.
Yeah, relatively close. You sort of pick out drivers and see where they stand at the moment. Great to see, and yeah, great battling there between Sendle and Cialato. They're both having the respect for each other. They gave each other the room, and in the end, Cialato realised that he'd outbraked himself, because we've already seen the McLaren was so good on the brakes, and if that tactic of well, whenever you brake, I'm going to brake just 10 metres later, well, with that Aston Martin not so good on the brakes, that would be the contributing factor to why he ran over the curbs there. A little bit of a mistake from Cialato, but he was under a lot of pressure from that McLaren. Christian Sendle getting the move done. Let's see what the gap is. Yeah, it's now up to 2 seconds between them now, so you can see the pace was on Christian Sendle's side, but the engine was definitely on the side of Alex Cialato.
Now, I've got some interesting information for you, Kieran. Dario Barzaghi last time round a 50.290, a 1 minute 50.290. Luca Prinzi last time round a 49.597. Luca Prinzi closing the gap the last time round. This time round Dario Barzaghi looks to be a little bit quicker.
Yeah, and that might have just been a mistake on Barzagi's part then, as he makes his way across the line. Last time there, 49.9. We see Prinzi come across the line, and that was a 1 minute 50 to the T. So a little bit of now in the favour of Barzagli there. So it's going to be back and forth between the two of them, but over 2 laps, Prinzi has really helped that gap come all the way down. And there you can see the four-way split screen there of really who you need to be keeping your eyes on there. Wherever you look, there's some great bits of driving out there. Gap between the leaders, I should say, Pierluca Amato and Marcello Bonacorsi, roughly 7-8 seconds at this moment in time, and it just keeps getting in the favour of Pierluca Amato by about 2-3 tenths per lap at this stage of the race, with 1 hour and 22 minutes left on the clock of the first round of the second season of the GTR 24H Sprint Series. Reigning champion on top at the moment then, Yusuf.
Yep, Pierluca Amato looking to start off his defending campaign in the exact same way he ended it, with a win in Italy, albeit that win was, I believe, in Misano. I'm not sure if it was in Misano or Monza. It might have actually been Monza. However, one other thing I do want to touch on as well is that if there is anyone who is watching wanting to get involved, sign-ups are still open. A very long championship ahead, 15 rounds, and even if you miss this opening round of the season, still a good chance that you can be involved in a great championship battle. And even then, even if you're not in a championship battle, some great battles out on a track. I do believe next week, is it? I think it's Zolder we're heading to, and then Kyalami for round 3 2 weeks after that.
And also you get the opportunity to be shouted over by myself and Yusuf, and I can't think of anything better in the world. Oh, driving the cars would be, yeah, of course, yeah. Well,
no, I always used to like, no matter what competition it was, whether it was sim racing or some other esports, always at the end going and listening back and hearing the commentators. And then because I was always at the back or not doing well, they never talked about me, so that was always very sad. So I thought, well, I might as well become a commentator, then I can talk about whoever I want.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That's the route in. I remember I did a couple of races. I've only really ever won a couple of races, and when I say a couple, I mean 2 in my entire career, which is probably why it's very nice and comfy in the commentary box here. But yeah, I still go back to those wins, even though they were about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Yeah, I like to reminisce. I love to reminisce. Oh, what a time! What a time! What a time I was on the top step of the podium. What a terrifying and cursed timeline that really was, eh?
It reminds me of another one of our fellow sim racing commentators, Jacob Hancock. He always likes to go back and talk about how he once beat, I believe it's a driver who goes by the name of Napadovsky, who's now in F1 Challengers or esports, and always likes to say 5 years ago he beat him once in a race, which is always a nice point, a nice little throwback. And maybe some of the drivers at some point can throw back to this in many years' time. Tell their garage, did you know once I raced against Pierluca Amato and I managed to beat him in a race? That race doesn't look like it'll be here at Monza, but maybe in one of the future races it could happen.
It really is your sim racing claim to fame. That's what it is. If you get those stories, and if you can have at least one, you consider it a pretty good career. Obviously, lots of other people who've won championships over the past 2 years, especially high-profile championships. We've got the champions of the EWC as well. We all went to Le Mans. The commentators did, treated very nicely, very royally in Denmark. There, they rolled out the red carpet for us, Yusuf, and well, my goodness, a show was put on for sure.
Are you missing those burgers and pizzas yet, Kieran?
I'm always missing burgers and pizzas, Yusuf. You know me. They were fantastic out there, no doubt about that.
Just to give our viewers some context, the final round of the Endurance E-Racing World Championship is usually a LAN event held in Denmark, and when we go to Denmark, the pizzas there are something to behold, as well as their burgers, it seems. Just the food just seems great. So we're anxiously looking forward for our next trip, which actually is not too far away. I think it's in 1 month, the first round of the Endurance E-Racing World Championship 2020 2022, which will be at Matsusaka in Japan, and that should be an absolute belter for different classes: GTEs, GT3s, LMP2s, and the hypercar class. We've got those GTEs in action though right here for the Sprint series because, well, actually no, not GTs, GT3s. I always get those two mixed up. They are very similar. And it is Pierluca Amato who is the king of the GT3s right now in the early stages of the season, leading from Bonacorsi and leading by nearly 10 seconds. He's been slowly but surely extending that gap out. And with 40 minutes done, we're starting to enter that phase where we might see some scheduled pit stops.
Indeed, and yeah, as you say, coming up towards just 77 minutes left to run in this race, and the field is evenly spread out, it's fair to say, at this moment in time. Pierluca Amato leading the way at the top of the table. Marcello Bonacorsi in the Team Vallas Esport BMW in second place. That number 475 is trying to run through the orders. Fastest lap of this race so far. I'll give you three guesses. You won't need all of them, and I'll tell you the answer. It's Pierluca Amato, 48.57 at this moment in time.
To be fair, that is not too much quicker than Marcello Bonacorsi, because Bonacorsi put in a 48.8, so just a couple of tenths between them. And we'll have to see what the second stint of this race does bring our way, as we have our first actual pit stop. Is Alex Ciolato from P7, so running a little bit light in the Aston Martin for his opening stint, Kieran.
Yeah, and I think that may have actually helped him down the straights when he was battling away with Christian Sendle. What means is he'll have a heavier car for the stint, at least for the first 50 minutes, and then it will start to, obviously get on his side again, and he'll be back to where the car was. But a fresh set of tyres, 76 minutes maybe on fresh tyres, maybe he keeps the same, but whatever he's decided, he's back underway. In fact, there's been a driver change, and it's now Alessio Vacherka who is behind that wheel now, as he now makes his way back onto the circuit. Renegade in the 42 changing their driver, and there goes Vacherka back out onto circuit to set some more lap times. He's taken over and rejoins in 7th place.
Still ahead of Wojtek Dvorak, who we saw having to make a pit stop earlier on in the race. Not quite sure why. I think he might have had some damage to his car after a potential spin. Maybe we can clarify that with him after the race. But Ciolato finds himself sitting or having switched out with Vacherka in P7. Just checking the gap, it's nearly actually 30 seconds between Vacherka and Dvorak.
Absolutely, and I'm sure some pit stops will be happening very, very soon. For us, though, it's a pit stop of our own. Join us after these breaks, where we'll come back for some more racing action in the GTR 24H Sprint Series Season 2 here at Monza.
The GTR 24H Sprint Series Season 2, Monza, is presented in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, A-Stick Sim Sport, ESTV, and MotorVision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
Welcome back then to the GTR 24H Sprint Series here at Monza. I think I stole Yusuf bin Sahay's thunder there. He wanted to lead us back into that. Yusuf, we're just slowly approaching the pit stop windows then. 71 minutes left on the clock. Obviously, still that styrofoam all across the second Lesbo there. We're getting into sort of crunch time with over an hour to go.
Absolutely, and we started to see a few pit stops coming in already. Maybe we need to get a few marshals on the track just to sweep some of that pyrostome away, maybe get one of the drivers just to kindly knock it away. But I think it's giving a good reminder for Christian Sendle every time he goes past. Okay, don't understeer on the exit of Lesbo 1. It's funny because we brought it up as well before the show too. We spoke about the understeer. It wasn't quite understeer for Christian Sendle, it was more just going in a little bit too hard, but then again, it's a subtle difference between carrying too much speed and understeering into a corner.
Yeah, and maybe a lack concentration as well, taking the corner not as cleanly as you would have done under normal circumstances, but nevertheless, a mistake was made and he has to try and get his way through. This is not a move for position, by the way. This is Vacherka who's trying to get past the green Mercedes there of Dario Barzagli, and he that ended up with egg all over his face then because he rode all of those curbs and has had to give up yet another place. I think that's one of his teammates there in the darkness. I couldn't quite make out who that. It is Princey, you're absolutely right. So not exactly what you want to be doing, considering Princey is the one who's trying to chase down Barzagli for position.
So I think there was a bit of team orders going on there, and essentially Vacherka being told, okay, if you can try to find a way past Barzagli, go for it. He goes for it, outbrakes himself. Barzagli is probably thinking, what are you doing? You're a lap car, literally dive bombing me. And then, as that's Barzagli running a little bit wide, but he doesn't quite do a Sendle as he brings it back on to a circuit. So I think Barzagli was wondering, okay, what on earth are you doing? And then as Vacherka came back on circuit, he came back on circuit right in front of Princey. So overall, karma striking, and it's actually the Renegade Sim Racing Group who lose out from it.
Yeah, there's nothing against you battling, and there's nothing to say that you can't unlap yourself. The only thing is that you have to do it safely, and then you have to pull away again. Otherwise, you will get blue flagged in order to pretty much move over once again. So you've really got to be confident that you can be quicker than the car ahead. And in theory, Vacherka, he's got, he's made his pit stop, so in theory he should be fresher, should be able to drive that car harder, but obviously with those blue flags as well, not great on his part to clout the curbs like that, and I don't think that would have done the underside of the car much good whatsoever.
Well, I wonder if that's actually part of it, because Vercherka is jumping into the car for the first time, wasn't in the car for qualifying. Maybe just not getting that braking point right, maybe thinking he could brake later, maybe he thought that was actually a fair move, and then realized very quickly that the car doesn't actually stop that fast. Either way, he is behind both Princi and Barzaghi, and Princi can try to hunt down Barzaghi once again between the pair of them. Barzaghi actually 1/10 quicker on the last lap, and then there's a 10-second gap from these two down to Simone Vercherka in the 46 Renegade Sim Racing Work Group car.
Absolutely. And just looking at the top of the order at the moment, it is Pierluca Amato leading the way, trying to pick up from where he left last season. Oh, it's the Dario Barzaghi who gets onto the grass there, just about saves that one from going into the area there, loses the position to Luca Princi, but that's all he's lost for now. My, that was so close to the wall there. How on earth did he keep that away from that arm code that's just inches away?
And this is, we talked about the drivers maybe over the course of a long race getting a little bit tired, and I'm not talking about tired as in sleepy, physically tired, because being in a sim rig for that long, especially if you've got high force feedback settings, can really do work on your arms. And we're not even an hour in, and maybe Barzaghi starting to show some lapses already and might be keen to jump out of the car and bring his teammate in. But either way, Barzaghi finds himself behind Princi, and will have to get his head down and close back towards that third and final podium position before he jumps in and hands on over to his teammate. Actually, no, I think Barzaghi's doing the whole race. His teammate is Aigo Sakuro, and maybe we'll see Aigo jumping in. We'll have to wait and see.
A hair-raising moment for Barzaghi nonetheless. You know, that would have raised the heart rate a little bit, would have woken him up in his sim rig for sure, just to keep him on the ball there. Yeah, very scary moment for him. Got away with it and only lost a position out of all of that, which in the grand scheme of things is not too bad. He's still got 66 minutes to really make up for ground there, and Princi's not too far up the road. The only problem is he's got Alessio Vercherka, who is a lap down, but we've already seen that Vercherka will go for a move if he thinks it's on right now.
And Vercherka will do whatever he can to try to help out his Renegade Sim Racing teammate. He is very close, isn't he? Make sure you don't flash the lights, because the old light flashing can sometimes get you awarded a little penalty. So Vercherka will just try to use Barzaghi to drag him forward, and Vercherka is in effectively a battle with Christian Sendle, as we see Wojtek Dvorak jumping into the pits, and this will be his teammate Tilly Franks jumping in to take over. So 5 minutes before the hour mark, and Wojtek will make his scheduled pit stop.
Yep, and this should be the scheduled pit stop for the Ledge Racing McLaren. He actually missed his pit box there very slightly, had to reverse back to make sure that the team could start working once he got into the right position, but now that goes up, and he will be obviously. Whether he takes on fresh tyres is another case. Fuel, you know, how much fuel goes on board? Do you try and nip and tuck it and try and run the least amount of fuel you possibly can? All that strategy would have been decided in moments and finalised moments before the car was rolling down the pit lane. But we've seen here, I do wonder, the battle between Princi and Barzaghi could be decided in the pit lane. I mean, Barzaghi was losing ground to Princi lap by lap. We would have seen a great battle between the two of them, very similar to what we saw between the numbers 93 of Christian Sendle and the number 42 car earlier on in the race. But obviously that mistake from Dario Barzaghi sort of robbed us all of that great battle that was developing there. They're still within 2 seconds of each other, but could have been battling for position at this point, Yusuf.
Absolutely, and something else I want to touch on quickly about the pit stops before they do happen, so I can look a little bit smart when it does occur, or it doesn't occur and then I look very stupid, is the fact that Barzaghi is in the Mercedes. And the Mercedes, for many drivers who have been on ACC, is one of the most, if not the most, fuel-consuming car out of everyone, out of every single car. So when Barzagli pits, he's going to have a lot more fuel to put in compared to Princey. So I think he's actually going to lose about 6-7 seconds relative to that Aston Martin from the pit stops alone.
Yeah, and that will also lead to a heavier car at the start of the stint as well in order to get the car to the end of the race. So it's all a case of how's the car set up to deal with that extra bit of weight that the other cars may not have. As Teddy Franks is now into the car, he's taken over. We should see that car rolling down the pit lane anytime soon. There is Dario Barzagli then, who's still trying to make up for lost time here down in towards the Rettifilo chicane. Meanwhile, Pierluca Amato still at the head of the order. Marcello Bonacorsi rounding off the top two drivers, top two separated by roughly 10 seconds at this moment in time. So it's been steadily on the increase in terms of Pierluca Amato extending that gap. But I have to say, Marcello Bonacorsi, his pace has been really good considering he only set one timed lap in qualifying. That was the only build-up he had in what we've seen officially coming into this race, which must have meant a lot of time was spent putting in those laps earlier on in the week. Teddy Franks then does now leave the pit lane in that number 34 McLaren and rejoins into this race in the Ledge Racing 34 car.
That's a very long pit stop for Ledge Racing, so I wonder if there was a bit of damage that had to get repaired. As we see more sparks are flying up from that green Mercedes of Dario Barzagli as he makes his way out of Lesmo 2 down the straight towards Ascari. But to go back to your point about Marcello Bonacorsi, it's been a very impressive performance from him and from Renegade, from him and Team Ballas Esports, because they've been pretty much right up there with Pierluca Amato. Yes, they do find themselves about 10 seconds behind, but it's still a decent job, as we're waiting to see when we do finally get the pit stops from our leading two drivers.
Absolutely, and Barzagli there just making his way through towards the long right-hander there. There's the onboard then of our race leader Pierluca Amato then, as he makes his way through the Curva Grande and now up towards the Roger chicane. It's been pretty comfortable for himself so far, considering the gap between himself and the driver next to him on the front row of the grid, Marcello Bonacorsi, was roughly 6-7 tenths of a second. You know, it was an impressive pole position lap time, and it's just led on into a very impressive race pace as well. Did wonder at the start of the race how the car would handle on heavy fuel. It seems to handle a lot better. It seemed to be a lot more set up for light fuel running at the moment with Pierluca Amato extending that gap bit by bit, lap by lap.
Pierluca Amato making his way down into Ascari. We hit the 1 hour mark. This is where we're going to see more pit stops, and with that it's actually Christian Sendle who will jump into the pits for the number 93 Outlaw Racing car. Sandro Van Sand who will be jumping in to replace him, as it's very dark on the track and there aren't many cars moving, so not quite sure what the issues are, and hopefully this will all be resolved as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're just seeing some, it's almost equivalent to watching the submarines at the moment. It's quite eerie now. There's a silence over Monza that we're not familiar with, Yusuf.
Especially not when we've got cars going around the circuit as well. Maybe we've jumped forward 20 years and this is the electric GT racing that is occurring.
Maybe. This is the future, is it, Yusuf? It looks very dark, the future.
It does seem so, and it does seem that actually the server did die, so I wouldn't be surprised if we got a loud message from race control to essentially just notify all of the drivers so they don't think it's their own internet that failed on them. So, Kieran, it does seem that the server is down, which I don't really know what the stewards are going to decide with this, because they've essentially got two options: either to discount this opening race or to say we essentially take the results of before the pit stops really came into play. Maybe half points, I don't know.
Well, the only thing we could do is await to see what happens, whether the result is declared, as you say, and see what happens there. We'll obviously bring you up to speed and keep you up to date with everything that happens. But for now, you get to hear from myself and Yusuf waffle on and talk about, well, whatever we want to talk about. I mean, it was a dominant run from Pierluca Amato. We were talking about the top two there, streaking away from the rest of the field. The gap at the time was roughly 13 seconds between the two of them. Would have been interesting to see how the pit stops would have shaped up, because
and those pit stops as well, we had already had a few pit stops coming in. Christian Sendle had pitted for the number 93 car, and Sandro Van Sande was about to get on the wheel of it. We also saw the number 42 and 34 pitting as well, Alleged Racing and the 42 of Renegade Sim Racing. But I don't believe any one of the top four or top 5 drivers had pitted, actually.
I think, look at it, yeah, top 5 hadn't pitted, because it's only just clicked to me now that 2 Vacherkas were driving, Simone and Alessio. That's only just clicked now, but there you go. So yeah, the top 5 hadn't pitted yet in that race, and we were approaching that time when we would have seen the drivers getting into their pit stop window. And some of them would have had to change, well, not necessarily have to change driver. Driver change is not mandatory because we're seeing one-car teams. But if they were to make a driver change, that's when they would have made it, take on that fuel, change those tyres if they wanted to as well. You know, we were talking about how Monza's quite misleadingly harsh on the tyres. There's lots of high-speed corners. In order to keep the temperature and the tyres in their right window, you've got to make sure that you're not putting too much stress through the tyres, through the high-speed corners. You've got the 2 Lesmos, you've got Ascari, and where you're running lower downforce, you're relying much more on the mechanical grip that maybe you would do at other circuits, and more mechanical grip means you're putting more load into the tyres. Therefore, in theory, you're actually wearing out the tyres faster than maybe you would at other circuits.
Yeah, and well, as you mentioned, a lot of high-speed corners, in particularly you're looking at Lesmo 1 and Lesmo 2, Ascari, Parabolica, where you put so much load onto the outside tyre, you really chuck the car in as well, and it can lead to a lot of wear. But most of the drivers had been able to make it to pretty much an hour before their pit stops. How worn their tyres are is something that we won't know. I think it was only the 34 of Ledge Racing that actually pitted a fair amount before the 1 hour mark. We're still waiting for news from the race control, essentially, to see what is happening with this one. I think the most likely conclusion is that this race will essentially be called off because, well, we're over halfway through it. We can't exactly say, let's go back and restart the race. Maybe if we were 5 minutes in, that would be a reasonable course of action.
Yeah, and obviously it's race control's decision what happens towards the end of the day. As you say, you were past the halfway point, only just past the halfway point when this race was suspended. And again, it's up to race control to decide where we go from here and what happens from this scenario. And yeah, having drivers already made their pit stops, and which for some of them have been scheduled. You know, you've got the likes of I think Christian Sendle was actually coming into the pit lane at the time. You had the 34 also into the pit lane, the 42 into the pit lane, with Alessio Vacherka and Teddy Franks taking over their respective cars. They've made their scheduled stops, and so it would seem a little bit unfair to mean that their pit stop puts them at a disadvantage.
But it does seem that this will essentially be the end of the race, and as you mentioned, Kira, there's a few different there's a few different results that could happen from this, whether we take half points from it, whether it is full points, looking at it from before the pit stops, or whether the race is essentially nullified. So we do apologize to everyone that essentially the race has come to a conclusion like this. There's nothing that we can really do about it. It just seems that the servers have fallen. So Kieran, any final words to essentially tell people to tune in 2 weeks' time when we do make our way to Zolder?
Well, this was your hour trial of the GTR 24H Sprint Series, and we saw some great battling for positions as well. And it's such a shame because we were seeing the battle between Prinzi and Barzaghi coming to light, but we were treated to an absolutely brilliant battle over 6th place. Christian Sendle absolutely trying to get the move done in the McLaren there. Finally got the move done at the expense of the Aston Martin, just missing the braking point going in towards the Rettifilio chicane. What I will say though is we've got 14 races to go. A lot can happen here, and with the race being declared as is right now, obviously it's now up to race control to decide how the points are awarded, etc., which of course we will update you on GTR 24H's social platforms, so make sure you're following all the way through. As you can see, we've got the highlights of what has been certainly an eventful opening round here at GTR 24H this series, Yusuf.
Yeah, just to echo what Kieran said, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time for our second round of the season, or maybe the effective first round of the season at Zolder. And to anyone who is watching, maybe was thinking, oh, damn, I missed the opening round. Well, maybe you get a second chance of doing that, so make sure to head on over to GTR 24H to sign up. You can also sign up for the Endurance E-Racing World Championship that is just over a month away and will be at Matsusaka for the opening round. But for myself, Kieran, and everyone here at GTR 24H, apologies again that the race came to a close like this, but we'll see you in 2 weeks' time from Belgium.
GTR 24H Sprint Series Season 2, Monza, is presented in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, A-Stick Sim Sport, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.